From the Ash Rises a Phoenix, Chapter 10, written by Kangarooney. Aaron watched the steam curl in the air. It barely managed to reach a few centimeters before it disappeared into the air. He let his other hand hover over the tendrils. Steam should be hot, yet to him it felt a little warm, but cooled quickly. He dropped the injured hand and raised the other to his eyes. The skin was his regular tone. There weren't any red marks or flushing from the heat. Aaron's body ran warm for as long as he could remember. After Shiganshina's invasion, Armin and Mikasa would snuggle up below his arms, soaking in his heat. Their first winter on the streets was spent dirty, starving, but not frozen. The winter in Trost was colder than Shiganshina, yet it hadn't felt as cold as it should have. Begging on the streets, stealing from market stalls, digging through trash, they'd been frozen to the touch. But when they reunited to huddle for warmth, they were able to thaw, to refresh and sleep warm. His eyes dropped to his steaming hand. When they were on the streets, his wounds didn't steam. When he was among the other cadets, he didn't bruise as easily, nor did his wounds heal like a titan. If they had, Aaron would never have made it out. So why then did these abilities only appear in Trost? Trost was invaded 1 week ago. They'd only been outside Wallrosa for 7 days. Now look at them. He raised his hand to his lips, trapping the steam inside his mouth. If they could harvest water from titans, and he was a titan, then he should keep his water inside him, right? Armin and Mikasa were noticeably gray during the day. Their movements slowed, exhausted. Their lack of nutrition, rationed water, constant travel, it was all compiling into a breaking point for them. By all rights, Aaron should be in a similar level of disrepair. Aaron should be too tired to harvest steam from titans. He shouldn't have even thought of making such a reckless decision. And yet, he had, because, unlike the two others, Aaron felt okay. Well, obviously not at this very moment. He'd had his arm crushed in the mandible of a titan, yet somehow his joints were returning to working order. The bruising was diminishing, and even now he was parched, but not dying of thirst. From the cadets' survival training, water wasn't a bonus, it was a necessity. 3 days without any water, that was the max a human could survive. Aaron wasn't human anymore, was he? As the sun rose, so too would his family. So too would he see their shadowed eyes, their dragging feet. Aaron should be unconscious from pain. Instead, he was sucking on the injury of his hand, wide awake. As the sun rose, so too would the titans. Then the trio would stay in the trees, unable to find water, unable to harvest any. Then another night would come. They were dying. They couldn't stay here. What? He coughed. Right. He had forgotten he couldn't speak. Aaron pushed to his feet, swayed, or were the trees swaying? He pressed his good hand to his head, closed his eyes, and waited. Slowly, the spinning stopped. He opened his eyes once more. Aaron approached Mikasa first. She'd slumped farther down on the bags. The scarf she wore around her neck was loose, pulled up to her ears from how she'd slid from sitting upright to almost lying down. Her shirt was pulled into her chin. Careful, he nudged her thigh with one boot. She shuffled, but didn't wake. On any other day, Mikasa would wake at the slightest sound. But now, when he couldn't yell at her, she refused? Go figure. He prodded her leg harder. Wake up, Mikasa. Ugh. She groaned and batted his foot with her hand, turning over. Before he could decide to do anything else, Mikasa sat straight up and turned back to him. Aaron, you're okay? She rolled to her knees, then scrambled to her feet. She moved too fast, and Aaron caught her as she swayed, leaning hard to the side. She held her head in the same position he had done just earlier. Unlike Aaron, she took much longer to recover. Even when she reopened her eyes and looked up, he could see a slight glaze in her eyes. Mikasa wasn't well. Affirmed in his guesswork, Aaron nodded and smiled to let her know he understood what she hadn't said. Armin, he mouthed, gesturing to their third. Right, Mikasa rasped back. She dropped to her knees and crawled to Armin. Armin, wake up. Like Mikasa, Armin took much longer to wake. Groaning and batting at her hands, he rose to a seat and couldn't seem to focus for much too long. What? Excuse me, he cleared his throat. What's going on? Aaron woke me. She gestured, and Aaron waved where Armin looked. You're awake? You're standing? How? Armin jolted in a similar way to Mikasa. You're okay? His voice cracked. Aaron gave a thumbs up with the injured hand. Look, he mouthed, lowering into their eyes, my hand. They focused and gasped at the small curlicue of steam. That's right, Armin investigated Aaron's face. I mean, obviously I knew you were a Titan in trust. It's been so busy and tiring that I haven't considered the implications of said state. So nothing can hurt you for long? He finished, questioning. Aaron shrugged. He had no idea. He'd been hurt from the attack. He blacked out from pain. He couldn't speak from screaming. Or was that heat drying his insides out? Aaron waved his hand to dismiss the conversation. They needed to leave these trees and find water. Without water, Mikasa and Armin would die. And Aaron might not. He dismissed that train of thought before it could take hold of him. Not now. Go, he mouthed, and pointed towards the open sky. Leave. It's too late, Armin shook his head. He immediately stopped and groaned. I'm so dizzy. That's why, Aaron waved for their sight again. We're dying. You're right, Mikasa agreed. We're worse off than yesterday before your plan. Not that it was a bad plan, she corrected, eyes wide. He gave her a thumbs up. It's okay. Then he turned back to Armin. Go, no water here. Yeah, you're right, but Aaron, we're out of gas. I think your gear was damaged again. Right. Aaron remembered missing his target and being pulled down. The wires may have snapped or been stretched. Perhaps a spring snapped? It didn't matter what happened. If they were alive, he would fix it later. They needed to leave. Please, he tugged on both of their shirts. Trust? Yes, of course, Aaron, Armin smiled weakly. The expression didn't reach his eyes. Then go. He could lower them with his hooks, and then manually rewrap the wires. Trust. He reassured when they looked over the edge. Unfortunately, they didn't see his lips and didn't catch the effort. He rose and wobbled to Armin, who was still looking down at the ground. Aaron wrapped an arm over his friend's shoulders. Armin. He tilted Armin's face until the other boy met his eyes. Trust? Okay. Armin hesitantly nodded, chewing his lip. Okay. Thank you. Aaron squeezed his shoulders and pulled at his own gear. One of the hooks was undamaged on his right side. Aaron compressed the trigger. With an empty gas canister, the spool's brake released and made it easy for Aaron to pull the grapple out with his other hand. Once he had about 1 meter out, he re-engaged the brake and set to fixing the grapple around Armin's equipment. It wouldn't be comfortable, but it should be secure. Thank the walls he opted for the survival-intensive class of the training corps. Thank the walls he expressed such interest in the gear. Thank the walls he knew what to do. Once Armin was tightly tied, Aaron explained that he was going to do as best as he could through rough gestures and mouthing words. He intended to lower Armin down the side of the trunk. Armin needed to keep his feet firmly planted against the trunk and walk himself down the vertical surface. If he slipped, Aaron would wait until he was able to regain his footing. For his hands, Armin needed to hold the wire leading up to Aaron and stay centered. Aaron, meanwhile, had an item known as a pulley. It was anchored into the tree and would help him keep a better hold of Armin. He thanked his foresight to bring the object and always keep it on him. "Calm, Armin," Aaron winked, trying to alleviate the poor boy's stress. "I'm ready," Armin replied, inhaling shakily. "Look at me. Don't look down." "Okay." Aaron stood at the ready and waited for his friend to make the first step. From what Aaron remembered during training, this technique scared many of the cadets, himself included. The instructors were telling them to walk backwards over a vertical edge with no gear and only their comrades' wire to keep them alive. Even after spending months in the ODM gear, the tactic was a large ask, and had resulted in many cadets fearfully backing away, only for the instructors to push them over the side. Armin was brave to listen to Aaron. Aaron felt warmth bloom in his chest. Armin trusted him, still. Slowly, Armin stepped back. His hands tightened around the wire, turning white in their grip. He leaned back into the seat as Aaron had instructed. A strangled whine was the only noise he made as he leaned fully, creating tension between his makeshift harness and the pulley. His eyes met Aaron's, and he nodded. Okay. Aaron pressed on the trigger lightly, focused intently on Armin's face, on letting the wire out slow and steady to ensure Armin had a smooth descent. He felt the pull of weight on his own belt. Armin was fully in Aaron's control. Concentrate. He watched as Armin followed his instructions, walking down the tree, head tilted up to keep Aaron in sight. Behind, Mikasa kept making small, encouraging sounds. Whether for her own sanity or his, Aaron appreciated them nonetheless. Armin's descent took a little over 7 minutes. By the time his feet were flat on the ground, Aaron felt he aged decades. But Armin was safe. The blonde fiddled with the knot, then tugged the wire twice to let Aaron know he could pull it back up. Mikasa and Aaron still had to go down after all. When both were securely on the ground, Aaron helped them into their saddles Armin had prepared. "Tie to horse," he mouthed, then ignored both when they went to disagree. "Trust, please." Somehow, this word was the gatekeeping word. Both of his friends immediately agreed and let him pull a rope from Armin's saddlebag and secure each of their legs to the sides of their saddles. They both looked like a washerwoman took soap to their faces and scrubbed their color away. Aaron ignored the sick swell in his stomach. They're so close to passing out. He would keep them safe. Once fixed to their saddles, he tied the horses to each other and mounted the lead. The seat felt warm, comforting. They were moving forward and leaving this dreadful forest behind. They would find water if it was the last thing Aaron did. He hoped it wasn't. Aaron clicked his tongue and tapped the horse's sides. Time to go. The trees disappeared quickly. They were so close to the edge that within minutes the trees were being left behind, and rolling hills stretched out on all sides. Aaron looked skyward and saw it, the home star. In Shiganshina, there were wells and a canal with water. They just needed to reach Shiganshina, and everything would be okay. Home.